Recently, I've been playing a ton of disturbing RPG Maker games, and they must have given me Stockholm Syndrome because pretty much immediately I was inspired to make my own. So, about 8 months ago, I started work on Grimdelve, a post-apocalyptic RPG about medieval people surviving underground after the end of the world. Now, medieval people were already a little crazy, so they get up to some real wacky shenanigans down there, and you have to survive it. To do so, you get to choose your character traits, make choices that are guided by them, and navigate a bit of gameplay that might result in death, friendship, or PTSD. Ultimately, you must decide how or even if humanity survives dealing with love, racism, violence, and more throughout. Today, we're gonna do an extended devlog where I share exactly how this game came to be, what I'm doing to make it stand out, some tips and tricks for other game devs, and how you can support the development of this frankly absurdly niche game. Now, despite the influence of the corrupting mind virus that is the LinkedIn game dev community, I wanted to create something completely unique, even if it's not destined to become slop that's recreated on Roblox and makes $1 billion. Unfortunately, nothing is ever completely unique, but I figured if I draw on my niche goon interests enough, then eventually I'll stumble upon an idea that nobody's ever made, because who the fuck would want to make that? Now, our story doesn't actually start there, though. The gooning comes a little bit later. To start, we actually have to go back to when I was 16 and wanted to become political and was playing Disco Elysium. That game, beyond obliterating my self-perception as the smartest political 16-year-old in the middle school, it blew me away with its trait system. I loved how each trait was personified, and instead of affecting the gameplay, it affected the dialogue and was even personified in it, and sometimes it didn't even directly lock you in a route, but instead just guided you that way based on the information that it provided to your character. Around that same time, I was playing another fantastic indie CRPG called Underrail, which takes place entirely underground. Now, I remember actually getting really frustrated at this game, thanks, Seth, but that setting stuck with me far beyond, long after I completed the game. So these two different pieces were kind of swirling in my mind, and then as soon as I started playing disturbing RPG Maker games, it clicked right away. I knew that I had to combine all of these things into one hell of a freaky amalgamation. I yoinked the setting from Underrail, yoinked the trait system from Disco Elysium, yoinked a couple other systems and settings and ideas and themes that I liked from disturbing RPG Maker games, and boom! Grimdelve was born. Which, by the way, if you want to check out Grimdelve right now, you can head on over to Steam, you can wishlist. Now, once I've got an idea, the next logical step for me is how do I make this game stand out, especially when I'm using RPG Maker, which looks bad most of the time. Now, immediately my hopes and dreams were dashed away because caves with the RPG Maker default assets look absolutely horrible. Everything blends together, nothing stands out, it hurts my eyes, just ugh. So, let's fix it. First step, let's get some lighting. Second step, custom tile sets. Well, actually, they cost $1 billion and I have no art skills, so instead, let's go find a relatively underutilized art pack online. This one looks pretty good, and boom! Now, even though there isn't actually weather in caves, I figured having some dust particles would give the game some depth and some more interesting things moving around to look at, so let's just give it a shot. Alright, we're looking pretty grimy and dusty and naughty. But one more step, everybody hates my weird stalagmite, assets here, so we're gonna just remove that and we're gonna replace it with a picture overlay. Boom. But a game with just caves gives the characters pretty much nothing to do except walk around and explore, which is pretty boring. We need political intrigue and drama. So how about this?
80 years ago, before Yarrow's people lived underground, the great king Charlemagne was shown a vision as thanks for his religious conquests. What he saw no one knows for certain, but his actions thereafter gave cause for priests, even in Yarrow's day, to whisper. Charlemagne sent 2 groups of the native Slavic population, along with a few members of his court, far away to settle underground, with orders never to return. Return they did not, for in a moment now forgotten to history, Charlemagne told those groups what he had seen. But the king's prophecy did not come to be as quickly as he thought it would. Decades passed, the king died, and the people who lived underground were forgotten. But now, 80 years later, as the king's empire lay scattered and Yarrow enters adulthood, Charlemagne's vision comes true.
To do that, I needed some custom artwork, so I went off to the incredible Gimpy to get some stills made for this scene, as well as all the other art in my game. By the way, they're also making a freaky game called Finest Fable. I've talked about it before, but you should definitely go check it out. There's a link in the description. Now, on top of art, I'm gonna need a voice actor, because while I could do it myself and polish up my ego, I tried that, and it scared the crap out of poor Rainy Tape Productions. 80 years ago, before Yarrow's people. Now, it came out great, unlike my hairline. I think this really shows the importance of getting other people to play test your game, because while players aren't always 100% correct, they will sometimes notice gaps that you as the developer who's so familiar with your game might have missed. And so I'm very fortunate to have such a positively freaky community to check out my game and give feedback on it, and also a Discord server that we've built over a long period of time. There's a link in the description. Come join us so we don't bite. To wrap up talking about my game story, I ultimately did decide to add in some Lovecraftian elements. Even though I want the game to be realistic, I figured it was a bit unrealistic enough as is, and Lovecraftian elements would really up the stakes and the helpless feeling that would permeate everything the player does, which is what all good Disturbing RPG Maker games have, so I kinda just did it.
Now, lastly, I have been trying to use my unfortunately now extensive knowledge of sodomy to incorporate some rather difficult scenes into Grimdelve, and I didn't realize it until writing these scenes, but it's emotionally devastating to even just create them. So I can now confidently say that all these other Disturbing RPG Maker game developers must have not been raised in white middle-class American suburbs.
I want Grimdelve to explore abuse and trauma in a variety of different ways and empower people to respond to those things in whatever way they choose. That's the main design philosophy of Grimdelve. There's no right answers. To some people, responding with violence to something like that is wrong, and to some people, responding without violence is stupid, and why would they do that? And so I want to give players a space where they can explore a variety of responses to a variety of difficult scenarios and, see how it makes them feel and explore that part of themselves that maybe they otherwise wouldn't be able to explore, which I think is really the important, powerful aspect of Disturbing RPG Maker games. I wanted to take this moment to give the players something to look at besides just rocks, so I figured that maybe the original groups had access to wood, but now that the world's ended, they've lost their access to wood, so the settlements are made out of wood, but it's slowly falling into disrepair. So now there's this kind of crumbling, decaying aesthetic that both fits the inventiveness of the survivors and the moral and violent decay of the underground. So now we just need to make like the entire game. So obviously I started by adding in footstep sounds, but then, what's next? How do you actually start a game? Now see, that's a little bit tricky because in onboarding a player, you want to get them familiar with the mechanics, but I don't have any mechanics built yet, so I kind of put a pause on the start of the game and instead started the player in the middle of an action scene, in the middle of exploration. That way, I could develop all the different mechanics, test how they might work in a gameplay, a slice of gameplay, and then figure out how the character got into that situation later. So I worked out my QTEs, my stealth system, how the different traits might interact, and then now that I have a scenario that the player's in, I just had to figure out how he got there. Since I have the boy main character alone in this segment, I figured maybe he's off exploring on his own for some reason, so maybe something really bad happened back at base, and he's been gone for a while. Oh, whoa, all of this planning and preparation and thinking things through, it's coming together. But just having this backdrop and then dropping the player into a cave doesn't really give the player motivation to walk around in the cave. They're just like, oh, I'm in a cave. Okay. So instead, I figured I would both bake the onboarding tutorial process and the exposition tension building process into the same thing. I'd have the game start with Yarrow just being born and then go through him growing up. So the player builds an attachment to him, an attachment to his family and some of the characters they'll encounter later, and they also attach pivotal moments in Yarrow's character development to learning how certain mechanics work so it sticks better in their mind. So while I was going going through this process, I started having a moment of game dev death spiral anxiety syndrome, where I started worrying that by not allowing the player to name their characters in an RPG, I was in some way impacting the role-playing experience. So, to get around this, I added in the ability to name their lantern. By allowing them to name it, every time the player uses it, they're reminded I have an impact, I have control, long-lasting control over the world around me, and in that moment it builds a deeper connection with Yarrow and the circumstances and the things he's experiencing. From here, it was mostly just figuring out where the story's gonna go, how gory and horrifying it was gonna get, and managing giant, branching, awful strings of dialogue because I got way overambitious in the amount of traits I included. I'm probably either gonna have to cut back on the amount of traits or make some of them not impact the game as much. Not really sure what to do, so if you're interested, leave a comment and share your thoughts. It would really help me out. I kind of skipped past it, but I didn't just add footstep sounds. I actually absolutely nutted all over this game's sound design. It drives me absolutely insane when an action in a video game does not match the sound that that action would make in real life. And perhaps I'm just autistic, but I think this matters to a lot of people more than a lot of new game developers think that it does. I spent a long time working on directional sounds, and finally I got it working. This might be what's tanked my game's performance thanks to my horrific coding abilities, but I think it was worth it. One final thing, and I noticed this just recently while I was playing Claire's Quest. Take a look at this scene and see if you can spot it. All of these NPCs have some interesting idle animation. It adds so much life to each area, and by comparison, Grimdelve looks like absolute garbage trash, and maybe I'm a little too harsh on myself, but I just knew I had to have it. Having just that little bit of extra movement added so much life to each of these scenes, and it only took me like an hour to do it. I wish other RPG Maker games would have this. Right now, the Grimdelve demo is about an hour long. I have all the basic mechanics done, the story structure in place, and those little bits of polish, like sound and art, pretty squared away. I'm gonna be able to put this whole game together. It just might take the rest of my natural and unnatural life. I'm envisioning about 4 hours in total worth of content, and the future structure being something like, MC1 goes through a day and does a quest and has a nighttime thing, and then MC2 does a similar thing, and then they repeat those respective structures until they eventually come together and meet and then have to decide the end of the world. It'll be a bit less comic book ending in the game itself, but that's the gist of my ideas, and I'd love for you to share your own if you have your own thoughts on where you'd like to see Grimdelve go. Now, I do plan to run a Kickstarter at some point in the future, but in an attempt to be the funniest man alive, I decided that I wanted to become the first RPG Maker GoonTuber to go to law school. So I applied and got accepted, and so now I kind of gotta go deal with that, and the idea of taking your money and then not being sure if I have the time to finish Grimdelve, yeah, I'm not going to run a Kickstarter just yet. But I am going to continue to work on the game, post devlog videos here and there, and it would mean a lot if you guys could head over to Steam and wishlist Grimdelve and support my development by just leaving words of encouragement and saying, yeah, you go, my favorite GoonTuber in college, wow, you got this, buddy. Geez, look back at my first video. It's crazy how time flies and where we are now.
Hello, YouTube viewers! Ma! Was that good?
Yeah, well, anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed and maybe learned something, and